Wu City, inside an e-commerce park. Cheng Zhu left a live streaming studio where a female anchor was promoting products and returned to his office. He plopped down into his chair, skillfully clamped a cigarette between his lips, then picked up a SD DuPont lighter that was on his desk. With a flick of his thumb, Cheng Zhu flipped open the lighter's lid, producing a crisp ding. This particular SD DuPont lighter had an official price of $13,200. As he always said, he bought it just for the sound. Inside the office, Cheng Zhu freely puffed out clouds of smoke, even resting his feet on the desk. He picked up his phone, opened TikTok, and immediately saw one of his female anchors busily promoting products. Cheng Zhu watched for half a minute, and then casually swiped past it. I'm quite confident in Yi's business capabilities. Yi was the top anchor in his company, whom he had personally mentored. Just her alone brought him close to an 8-figure income annually. That was certainly less than the top product promoters, but it was more than enough to make Cheng Zhu's profits overflow. Cheng Zhu treated her well too, in return, occasionally discussing billion-yuan projects with her in the suites of 5-star hotels. No choice, Chairman Cheng Zhu and Yi knew her role early on. The next TikTok he scrolled to was an interactive one. On the image was written, "If you were given a chance to be reborn and return to the past, would you want it?" This particular TikTok received over 2,000 comments. Out of boredom, Cheng Zhu opened it and saw, as expected, the majority said they would. Some wanted to mend a romance, others wanted to go back and make money, still others wished to focus on their studies. All kinds of desires. Cheng Zhu, with a cigarette still in his mouth, typed a comment directly. Not interested. Then he attached an image. It was a screenshot of one of his bank account balances showing over 6 million. As a successful young man with over 6 million in just one account, rebirth my ass, go back to a life of poverty and be a loser again. Among this circle of friends, Cheng Zhu was recognized as the king of boastfulness. No one could outbrag him. While boasting is a natural trait for most people, he truly excelled at it. He lived more carefree than most, with a touch of unrestraint. Unlike some of his friends who had to beat around the bush to show off, his comment, unsurprisingly, stood out among thousands. Soon he received several replies. "Where'd you find this internet pic?" Trying to pass it off as real. Images with mosaics are treated as fake. If this was real life, and you had 6 million in one card, I'd call you boss, but here on TikTok, you fall short, buddy. Damn, got flexed on. Delete it. I'll post a real one. I have 10,000 of these types in my gallery. Cheng Zhu extinguished his cigarette in the ashtray and laughed indifferently, not bothering to reply to these comments. As the light from the cigarette finally went out, he suddenly felt the world spinning around him. The next moment, he completely lost consciousness. Cheng Zhu. Cheng Zhu. A female voice began to ring in his ears. As his vision gradually returned, he saw a girl with chestnut-colored long hair, standing in front of him, looking annoyed. Cigarettes were also scattered on the ground. The scene felt somewhat familiar to Cheng Zhu, but he couldn't quite remember at that moment. Next to him and the girl stood 2 men and 1 woman. One of the men even said to Cheng Zhu, are you putting on show of melancholy here? Smoking is harmful to your health. Plus, you shouldn't have spoken to Li Xinyue like that. The next moment, Cheng Zhu felt his brain swelling slightly, and memories that had become a bit blurry were now getting clearer. Damn it. The dead memories are attacking me. He remembered this was the summer of 14, right after high school graduation. He and the girl in front of him, named Li Xinyue, had affirmed their relationship, marking the first romance of his life. This was their first big fight, and Li Xinyue had brought up breaking up. During his adolescent years, Cheng Zhu, somewhat melancholic and non-mainstream, began to smoke out of heartbreak, somewhat intentionally for Li Xinyue to see. It was similar to how some girls would get drunk and call their exes after a breakup, demonstrating their suffering. Thinking back on his past, he realized this was how he took to smoking cigarettes, supposedly contributing to national defense in his own silly way. The man who had just chastised Cheng Zhu was their class monitor, Li Rui. A good student and from a wealthy family, his father drove a car that was labeled as a Mercedes S350, but was actually an S300 with a modified emblem. Li Rui had always liked Li Xinyue, and their fathers seemed to be from the same village, having known each other since childhood. What's the saying? A celestial beauty cannot compare to a childhood friend. Li Rui wasn't tall or particularly handsome, unlike Cheng Zhu, who was 182 centimeters tall and had a roguish charm. During this initial romance, Cheng Zhu found Li Rui the most annoying. Under the guise of childhood friends, Li Rui would chat with Li Xinyue every day. Each time the couple argued, he would immediately comfort her, even inviting her for meals and movies, all under the flag of growing up together. Whenever an opportunity arose, He would try his best to show how gentle and considerate he was, a true nice guy. Unfortunately, at this stage, Li Xinyue was still focused on looks, not yet transitioning towards materialism. As the dead memories continued to assault Cheng Zhu, he remembered going back to make up with Li Xinyue, tails between his legs, after the fight. Initially, the fight had started because she had been unreasonable, but as soon as she played the breakup card, Cheng Zhu would foolishly surrender. Of course, in the end, they truly made up, and Li Rui ended up like a tool, having consoled Li Xinyue for 3 days, only to be sidelined with a good brother card. In those days, acknowledging each other as brothers and sisters was still popular among students. Just as Su Song still sings in his song, "She is just my little sister." At that moment, seeing Cheng Zhu still silent, Li Rui couldn't help but say again, "Cheng Zhu, it was wrong of you to start smoking. Don't you see how upset Xinyue is?" Standing to the side, another guy and girl spoke up. The guy with dark skin and acne said, "Brother Zhu, let's not take up smoking. It indeed harms our health." Cheng Zhu glanced at the boy called Wang Anquan, his gaze softening slightly. Wang Anquan's father was a firefighter. Sticking to the principle of safety first, he had named his precious son accordingly. He had been Cheng Zhu's high school deskmate and was his best friend from those days. The girl standing next to Wang Anquan was Chun Rongrong, Li Xinyue's best friend. Unlike Li Rui, who used the smoking issue to bring Cheng Zhu down, Wang Anquan genuinely cared for him. Cheng Zhu turned to look at Li Rui, scrutinizing this relentless monitor who was continually scheming to steal his girlfriend, and smirked. "Do you know the saying, nice guys finish after dogs? What level are you to steal my girl?" In the pecking order of guys, warm guys rank even below the bootlickers. Even if Li Xinyue and I don't make up this time, it's not your turn, you sheep in wolf's clothing. However, at this time, the term warm guy seemed still to be a compliment. Although Li Rui didn't fully grasp the underlying message in Cheng Zhu's words, anyone with half a brain would realize he was being insulted. "Cheng Zhu, you..." In front of Li Xinyue, he held back even from saying "you f***," maintaining what he believed was a gentlemanly and nice guy image. In the end, he could only slightly raise his voice and said, "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? Do you really need to ask?" Cheng Zhu raised his eyebrows slightly. He grinned and said, "You know, I generally don't say things to embarrass people, but if I ever do..." Cheng Zhu paused briefly, his smile broadening. "It means I really want to embarrass you." Wu City, inside an e-commerce park. Cheng Zhu left a live streaming studio where a female anchor was promoting products and returned to his office. He plopped down in his chair, skillfully clamped a cigarette between his lips, then picked up a SD DuPont lighter that was on his desk. With a flick of his thumb, Cheng Zhu flipped open the lighter's lid, producing a crisp ding. This particular SD DuPont lighter had an official price of $13,200. As he always said, he bought it just for the sound. Inside the office, Cheng Zhu freely puffed out clouds of smoke, even resting his feet on the desk. He picked up his phone, opened TikTok, and immediately saw one of his female anchors busily promoting products. Cheng Zhu watched for half a minute, and then casually swiped past it. "I'm quite confident in Yi's business capabilities." Yi was the top anchor in his company, whom he had personally mentored. Just her alone brought him close to an 8-figure income annually. That was certainly less than the top product promoters, but it was more than enough to make Cheng Zhu's profits overflow. Cheng Zhu treated her well too, in return, occasionally discussing billion-yuan projects with her in the suites of 5-star hotels. No choice, Chairman Cheng Zhu and Yi knew her role early on. The next TikTok he scrolled to was an interactive one. On the image was written, "If you were given a chance to be reborn and return to the past, would you want it?" This particular TikTok received over 2,000 comments. Out of boredom, Cheng Zhu opened it and saw, as expected, the majority said they would. Some wanted to mend a romance, others wanted to go back and make money, still others wished to focus on their studies. All kinds of desires. Cheng Zhu, with a cigarette still in his mouth, typed a comment directly. "Not interested." Then he attached an image. It was a screenshot of one of his bank account balances showing over 6 million. As a successful young man with over 6 million in just one account, rebirth my ass, go back to a life of poverty and be a loser again. Among this circle of friends, Cheng Zhu was recognized as the king of boastfulness. No one could outbrag him. While boasting is a natural trait for most people, he truly excelled at it. He lived more carefree than most, with a touch of unrestraint. Unlike some of his friends who had to beat around the bush to show off, his comment, unsurprisingly, stood out among thousands. Soon he received several replies. "Where did you find this internet pic?" Trying to pass it off as real. Images with mosaics are treated as fake. If this was real life, and you had 6 million in one card, I'd call you boss, but here on TikTok, you fall short, buddy. Damn, got flexed on. Delete it. I'll post a real one. I have 10,000 of these types in my gallery. Cheng Zhu extinguished his cigarette in the ashtray and laughed indifferently, not bothering to reply to these comments. As the light from the cigarette finally went out, he suddenly felt the world spinning around him. The next moment, he completely lost consciousness. Cheng Zhu. Cheng Zhu. A female voice began to ring in his ears. As his vision gradually returned, he saw a girl with chestnut-colored long hair, standing in front of him, looking annoyed. Cigarettes were also scattered on the ground. The scene felt somewhat familiar to Cheng Zhu, but he couldn't quite remember at that moment. Next to him and the girl stood 2 men and 1 woman. One of the men even said to Cheng Zhu, are you putting on show of melancholy here? Smoking is harmful to your health. Plus, you shouldn't have spoken to Li Xinyue like that. The next moment, Cheng Zhu felt his brain swelling slightly, and memories that had become a bit blurry were now getting clearer. Damn it, the dead memories are attacking me. He remembered this was the summer of 14, right after high school graduation. He and the girl in front of him, named Li Xinyue, had affirmed their relationship, marking the first romance of his life. This was their first big fight, and Li Xinyue had brought up breaking up. During his adolescent years, Cheng Zhu, somewhat melancholic and non-mainstream, began to smoke out of heartbreak, somewhat intentionally for Li Xinyue to see. It was similar to how some girls would get drunk and call their exes after a breakup, demonstrating their suffering. Thinking back on his past, he realized this was how he took to smoking cigarettes, supposedly contributing to national defense in his own silly way. The man who had just chastised Cheng Zhu was their class monitor, Li Rui. A good student and from a wealthy family, his father drove a car that was labeled as a Mercedes S350, but was actually an S300 with a modified emblem. Li Rui had always liked Li Xinyue, and their fathers seemed to be from the same village, having known each other since childhood. What's the saying? A celestial beauty cannot compare to a childhood friend. Li Rui wasn't tall or particularly handsome, unlike Cheng Zhu, who was 182 centimeters tall and had a roguish charm. During this initial romance, Cheng Zhu found Li Rui the most annoying. Under the guise of childhood friends, Li Rui would chat with Li Xinyue every day. Each time the couple argued, he would immediately comfort her, even inviting her for meals and movies, all under the flag of growing up together. Whenever an opportunity arose, he would try his best to show how gentle and considerate he was, a true nice guy. Unfortunately, at this stage, Li Xinyue was still focused on looks, not yet transitioning towards materialism. As the dead memories continued to assault Cheng Zhu, he remembered going back to make up with Li Xinyue, tails between his legs, after the fight. Initially, the fight had started because she had been unreasonable, but as soon as she played the breakup card, Cheng Zhu would foolishly surrender. Of course, in the end, they truly made up, and Li Rui ended up like a tool, having consoled Li Xinyue for 3 days, only to be sidelined with a good brother card. In those days, acknowledging each other as brothers and sisters was still popular among students. Just as Su Song still sings in his song, "She is just my little sister." At that moment, seeing Cheng Zhu still silent, Li Rui couldn't help but say again, "Cheng Zhu, it was wrong of you to start smoking. Don't you see how upset Xinyue is?" Standing to the side, another guy and girl spoke up. The guy with dark skin and acne said, "Brother Zhu, let's not take up smoking. It indeed harms our health." Cheng Zhu glanced at the boy called Wang Anquan, his gaze softening slightly. Wang Anquan's father was a firefighter. Sticking to the principle of safety first, he had named his precious son accordingly. He had been Cheng Zhu's high school deskmate and was his best friend from those days. The girl standing next to Wang Anquan was Chun Rongrong, Li Xinyue's best friend. Unlike Li Rui, who used the smoking issue to bring Cheng Zhu down, Wang Anquan genuinely cared for him. Cheng Zhu turned to look at Li Rui, scrutinizing this relentless monitor who was continually scheming to steal his girlfriend, and smirked. "Do you know the saying, nice guys finish after dogs? What level are you to steal my girl?" In the pecking order of guys, warm guys rank even below the bootlickers. Even if Li Xinyue and I don't make up this time, it's not your turn, you sheep in wolf's clothing. However, at this time, the term warm guy seemed still to be a compliment. Although Li Rui didn't fully grasp the underlying message in Cheng Zhu's words, anyone with half a brain would realize he was being insulted. "Cheng Zhu, you..." In front of Li Xinyue, he held back even from saying, "You F asterisk asterisk asterisk," maintaining what he believed was a gentlemanly and nice guy image. In the end, he could only slightly raise his voice and said, "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? Do you really need to ask?" Cheng Zhu raised his eyebrows slightly. He grinned and said, I generally don't say things to embarrass people, but if I ever do. Cheng Zhu paused briefly, his smile broadening. It means I really want to embarrass you. Wang Anquan was stunned upon hearing this, feeling the words were profound. When you reread a book, you might discover new insights, but the ending remains the same. He silently noted this statement, deciding to share it with others at an appropriate occasion after college. Moreover, when Brother Zhu was talking, he didn't look at me. He looked out the window, which made him seem even more profound. You see, after Cheng Zhu became accomplished at a young age, all the second-generation rich and first-generation entrepreneurs around him acknowledged that he had the strongest vibe. Wang Anquan, still a student party member, couldn't handle him. But the amount of information in that statement was quite a lot. Wang Anquan felt that Cheng Zhu might be disheartened, seemingly determined to break up and resolve the outcome once and for all. He just sighed and said, "Actually, Rong told me that Li Xinyue is just a bit of a princess at heart, but she still cares about you a lot." This made Cheng Zhu turn his head abruptly, sizing up Wang Anquan from top to bottom. He frowned and said, "Is it because Chun Rong and Li Xinyue are best friends, so you don't really want me to break up with her, making it easier for you to get close to Chun Rong?" Although this was partly what Wang Anquan was thinking, he still bluffed loudly in defense. "How could that be, Brother Zhu? Your mind is really dirty." "If it isn't, then good," said Cheng Zhu to him. His impression of Chun Rong was rather vague. Although some memories had resurfaced after his rebirth, he only remembered her as the first female classmate to get married in his class, seemingly getting pregnant before graduating from college, then forcing the man to marry her, or she would create a big scene. He hadn't interacted much with her afterwards, so he didn't have many memories. All he knew was that she seemed to have borrowed money from Wang Anquan after getting married, but he hadn't delved deeper into it because he was too busy at that time. Speaking of which, Cheng Zhu found the concept of rebirth quite fascinating. He had returned to his teenage years, yet with the mindset of many years later. During this period, he would have had a few years of being rather innocent. He had broken up with Li Xinyue after college and was heartbroken. But during that time, there was a female classmate who really cared about him, often initiating conversations with him and comforting him. Although this classmate was not as pretty as Li Xinyue, she spoke softly and, more importantly, had long legs. Cheng Zhu fell in love again, only to experience the stifling sensation of drowning in love, with the outcome still being awful, something he'd rather not remember. From then on, Cheng Zhu underwent some changes. He didn't become afraid of falling in love, didn't start preaching closing off one's heart, or the first move in getting back on track is to sever the person in your heart. His mindset simply changed, but life went on. Interact when it's time to interact. Break up when it's time to break up. Don't trap yourself or be too scared to keep moving forward. In all major navigation apps, there's a voice prompt that tells you when you've taken a wrong turn. Please choose an appropriate place to turn around and replan your route. It's not a big deal. Maybe that's why his friends thought he was the most carefree amongst them. The bus was traveling through Hang City. Cheng Zhu gazed out of the window, feeling everything familiar yet strange. At this time in Hang City, the property prices hadn't yet become as exaggerated as they were later, he thought to himself. Ironically, the bus passed by a property Cheng Zhu would buy later, but the area hadn't even been demolished yet. Damn it, I bought it, and it wasn't even renovated before I moved in, and I rebirthed. Cheng Zhu was frustrated to no end. This made him set a goal in his mind, to buy a house while the prices were still low and properly compensate himself. Now it's 2014, and although it just seems like a few years back in time, there are actually quite a few ways to make money. Cheng Zhu began to ponder. Just as he was thinking about how to madly make money, his phone beeped. It was a WeChat message from Li Xinyue. This time, it's really over, she had sent. Old routine, Cheng Zhu thought, laughing. Many people liked doing this, clearly wanting the other person to make amends, yet employing harsh words to push the other party to the edge, telling them there won't be another chance if they don't give in. Wang Anquan, being quite gossipy, leaned over to look. With student dynamics being straightforward, in a college dorm, you might even have a think tank advising on text responses while looking over messages. Then, he saw Cheng Zhu typing quickly, replying with, "Okay then." Just 2 words, and Wang Anquan's eyes widened in surprise. Following this, the typing indication at the top of the chat box showed up, then disappeared, switching to the note, "Yeah," and then back to typing. After several repeated appearances, the response came back with just 1 sentence. "Let's delete each other." Cheng Zhu quickly deleted Li Xinyue from his friend list. The whole series of actions were fluent and clear. Initially, he even planned to block her before deleting, so he wouldn't receive any friend requests from her ever again. Wang Anquan watched the process, feeling Why do I feel like Brother Zhu is too practiced at doing this sort of thing? He dumbfoundedly said, Did you just delete her? What else? Cheng Zhu responded naturally. I complied with her wish. What else should I do? Wang Achuan couldn't help but say, Brother Zhu must be driving Li Xinyue crazy right now, right? Cheng Zhu casually smiled and said, Actually, how I treated her is already pretty decent. Huh? Wang Achuan was baffled. Cheng Zhu explained, With Li Xinyue's personality, when she goes to college, she will most likely break up with me, then fall into the arms of someone else. Huh? Wang Achuan was even more confused. But you see, that would be after she starts college, and we're in a long-distance relationship. Think about it. I could have continued dating her over the summer. That way, he'd have daily kisses, daily cuddles. It would be a long summer, and with his current skills, he could easily have her completely entangled and unlock everything that needed to be unlocked. Then, just wait for the long distance to play out, utilizing resources in the limited time. Li Xinyue, being fickle-hearted and a bad girl, truthfully, wouldn't even put a psychological burden on Cheng Zhu. Of course, Wang Achuan couldn't understand any of this, and Cheng Zhu wasn't planning to let him. At this moment, a thought suddenly struck Cheng Zhu. It was a quote left by someone who many netizens referred to as Grandmaster. Although he hadn't planned to implement this famous saying on Li Xinyue, after thinking it over, he decided to note it down in his memo, feeling it had some referential value. Cheng Zhu opened the memo app on his phone and began typing. Wang Achuan watched from his side, feeling the first half was quite ordinary, and he even thought it was a bit cliché. But he was stunned by the second half of the statement, which shocked his innocent student's heart. Cheng Zhu wrote down the Grandmaster's quote, Don't let down the good girls, don't waste the bad ones. Wang Achuan felt like his soul had been hit by a formidable force. Good girls shouldn't be let down, and bad girls shouldn't be wasted. Brother Zhu actually wrote it down in his notes. The bus arrived at its stop at the neighborhood where Cheng Zhu and Wang Achuan lived. Sashaying off the bus, Cheng Zhu disembarked first, quickly followed by Wang Achuan. At the entrance to the neighborhood, they said their goodbyes, as their homes were in different directions. It's 4 in the afternoon, probably no one's home, Cheng Zhu thought to himself. His family owned a small restaurant, the Yunlai restaurant, located across the street from the neighborhood. The restaurant was small, consisting of just 2 rooms. In those days, private kitchens weren't yet popular, and the delivery industry was still developing. So places like this little restaurant mostly made money from dine-in customers. Cheng Zhu's father, Cheng Donglai, was the owner and chef of the restaurant. Overall, the business was neither particularly good nor bad. This meant that although Cheng Zhu grew up without any real wealth, he also never had to worry about food and clothing. Cheng had limited skills, but never let little Cheng go hungry. Looking back, running a restaurant was quite tough, with the smoke and flames every day, and occasionally dealing with difficult customers. I'll go home first, change clothes, and take a shower. I'll head to the restaurant for dinner at 5:30, Cheng Zhu decided. Upon arriving at home, he went straight to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. This hair is so long and such an ugly perm. Cheng Zhu couldn't help but think. During those days, perming hair in the style of a middle part or a 4/6 part seemed to be the trend. Once high school was over, many students let loose and splurged at hair salons. But this perfect hairline is really something to miss, Cheng Zhu couldn't help but say. Before showering, Cheng Zhu looked for a change of clothes in the wardrobe. He searched for a while and found that his trousers were either cropped or so long they dragged on the ground. Oh, I remember now, showing ankles was the fashion at that time. Either wear crop pants or roll up the trouser legs. Cheng Zhu chuckled. He faintly remembered a special method of rolling up the trouser legs to create the look of tapered pants. In the end, he picked out a pair of black sweatpants. After the shower, he did not rush out, but sat at the desk in his room, took out his phone, and checked his total assets. I have a total of 12,312 yuan, Cheng Zhu murmured. After the high school graduation exams, his elders would give red envelopes as gifts. In Zhejiang province, people were quite generous with their red envelopes. But given his family's financial situation, this amount of money was more than expected, mainly because his maternal grandfather was the type of old man who always had money in his pockets, always thinking he couldn't take it with him due to his age. So he was very generous with his grandsons and granddaughters, giving him alone an envelope of 5,000 yuan. Cheng Zhu had already spent a small part of this money during the summer vacation and still had over 10,000 left. If I remember correctly, most of this money would have been spent on Li Xinyue during the summer vacation, Cheng Zhu recalled. To go from having over 6 million in one account to all my assets being just over 10,000, gee, that's quite a drop. Cheng Zhu couldn't help but sigh. But the strong never complain about their circumstances. Force me to rebirth, right? Cheng Zhu thought. It would be a shame not to make some more money, given this opportunity. With just over 10,000 as a starting fund, what can I do in 2014? Cheng Zhu pondered. He checked the date. It was July 13th. Then he went online for a while to get used to the era and quickly had a plan for his first steps. Within 24 hours, I could multiply this money several times over. At that thought, he realized that if a person were reborn, they would indeed have a huge advantage. Cheng Zhu thought of someone the netizens jokingly referred to as someone with a system in their body, reminiscent of a life from a fantastical story brought into reality. He was Lei Bu Si. Mr. Lei once said, "As long as you stand at the right place at the right time, even pigs can fly." Returning to his youth, Cheng Zhu felt he had to seize something more, or else the rebirth would be for nothing. Go on, young man, meet the winds of fate. Tonight, Cheng Zhu would stand at his first important juncture after rebirth. But before that, he was going to have dinner at the Yunlai restaurant. And, believe it or not, he felt oddly nervous on his way to the restaurant. Besides that, there was also excitement and anticipation. My parents at this time are much younger than they were back then. Little Yuzi is still in kindergarten. Little Yuzi was his sister. Her name was Cheng Yu, and she was 5.5 years old. His family typically favored girls over boys, treating their daughter like a princess while the son at best could hope to be a sword-bearing royal guard. Arriving at the Yunlai restaurant, Cheng Zhu took a deep breath and pushed the door open. As he entered Yunlai restaurant, he saw his mom, Su Yun, bustling about. Many might have this feeling that ever since they can remember, their mom has always been a middle-aged woman. How many people can clearly remember what their mother looked like when she was young? Su Yun was exactly 40 years old, indeed a middle-aged woman, but compared to the image in Cheng Zhu's memory, she looked much younger. What's the matter? Su Yun, puzzled, stared at her son who was staring blankly at her. Mom, you're really young. No, I mean you look really young today, blurted out Cheng Zhu. What nonsense? Su Yun, usually gentle, furrowed her brow involuntarily and quickly turned to grab a bowl of iced mung bean soup from the fridge for her son. This generation of mothers might ask their sons if the food they prepare tastes good, but they rarely ask if they look pretty. Likewise, children seldom compliment their mothers on looking young and beautiful. Cheng Zhu's thought was simple. Lavish praises on an outsider woman, and she might still regard you as a sycophant. But casually compliment your mom, and truly, she would be happy all day long. Today, Su Yun was unexpectedly flattered by her son's unconventional praise. It took her a while to pretend everything was normal and went to the bathroom, where she bashfully looked at herself in a mirror back and forth. At first glance, she didn't notice anything, but as she kept looking, I guess, there's a bit, she whispered to herself, joy spreading at the bottom of her heart. Meanwhile, Cheng Zhu sat in his family's little restaurant, pretentiously sipping the mung bean soup. Soon enough, a little head popped out from beside the checkout counter, and with a roar like a fierce dragon, tried to startle him. Looking at the tiny Neza-like hairstyle, Cheng Zhu pretended to be utterly frightened, and the little girl immediately giggled. He picked up the little girl and looked at her round, chubby cheeks, her shining black eyes, and the endearing Neza hairstyle, and felt like he'd been struck by his sister's cuteness. Little Yuzi is only 5 this year. This is when she's at her most adorable, he thought to himself. He had always missed his sister from this period. Cheng Yu at this current age was also the closest to him, extremely clingy. Later, when he moved from Hang City to start a business in Wu City, first getting into e-commerce and then live streaming sales, he was away from his family, seeing Cheng Yu only a few times a year. After giving her a few rounds of lift high play, Cheng Zhu put her down to sit next to him. Little Yuzi, do you want your brother to feed you some mung bean soup? He asked. Just a moment. Cheng Yu, small but savvy, raised a hand. What's up? Cheng Zhu looked puzzled. Brother, I wanted to ask you something, said the little girl. Go ahead, Cheng Zhu said with a smile. All day today, I was not at home. Did you miss me? Little Yuzi looked up, her chubby face lifted. I sure did, Cheng Zhu responded promptly, in a way that had a double meaning. It wasn't just a day I haven't seen you. It's been many years since I've seen this version of you. Little Yuzi immediately placed her small hand over her chest, breathed a sigh of relief like a little adult, and said in a sweet voice, That's good. I was worried it was just me secretly missing you at the restaurant. My sister's simple words melted Cheng Zhu's heart. Fuck, my sister is so damn cute. With Cheng Zhu's current mindset and status, ordinary women couldn't tug at his heartstrings. But a word in little Yuzi's milky voice, and she could ask him to do anything right now, he would go do it. Hooked, totally fucking hooked. How would he not earn a castle for the princess? Making money. This life, he had to try even harder to make money. Cheng Zhu sipped green bean soup as he was plunged into memories. Thinking about it, I still have regrets regarding little Yu. Cheng Zhu thought to himself. In his memories, His sister Cheng Yu was a particularly lively and quirky little girl when she was young. But after starting junior high, she became more and more reserved and introverted. It was only later and by chance that Cheng Zhu learned she had been verbally harassed by some of her female classmates in middle school, just because she matured early and the loose school uniform could not hide it, leading them to brazenly and secretly call her slut. This caused little Yu to begin hunching her shoulders and slouching. Over time, her whole demeanor could not be changed back, and she became more and more insecure. For a girl, posture and temperament are really important. The same face, paired with different demeanors and temperaments, can undergo earth-shaking changes. These things he only learned later on from little Yu's best friend, angering Cheng Zhu to the point of wanting to tear those girls' foul mouths. That girl loved to chat with Cheng Zhu, thinking her best friend's brother was completely different from the boys in school. Afterward, Cheng Zhu insisted on sending his sister to attend Pilates classes that cost a few hundred yuan each, as well as hiring someone to correct her posture. But her character was hard to change back. In the future, I need to pay more attention to this issue, he thought to himself. With that thought, he stood up again and went to the restaurant kitchen. Here, as his father, Cheng Donglai, glanced at his son, he said indifferently. The Cheng family was famously biased towards girls. Cheng Donglai was as passionate as fire with his daughter, a complete slave to her, and laissez-faire with his son, as long as he didn't cause troubles outside. Dad, is there anything I can help with? He asked. Comrade Cheng was frying chili pork and gave his son a surprised look, saying only a few words. Go out and enjoy the air conditioning. Cheng Zhu didn't press the issue and obediently left the kitchen realm. Cheng looked at his son's retreating back and muttered, "It's really strange, this lazy bum actually offering to help." Back at the dining table, Cheng Zhu started planning again. If I remember correctly, this year my second uncle will come to scam money, leaving our family empty-handed, and Cheng endured a few tough years afterward. His health has always been not so good afterward, probably because of the exhaustion over the years. This world is such to the poor. Anything that can be solved with money has to be solved with health, life, time, dignity. Things more precious than money. People, many of them exchange their health for money when healthy, then exchange money for health when sick. Luckily, Cheng Zhu was quite successful in his career afterward and particularly cared for his parents' health. Cheng gradually got healthier year by year, and his mother Xian also became younger and livelier. He was fortunate that the speed he earned money caught up with the pace his parents were aging. Fulfilling filial duties comes too late for some. But since I've been reborn, I should at least make them live more comfortably, Cheng Zhu thought to himself. Making money. Still, he had to make money at the fastest speed. Thinking of this, he immediately picked up his phone and opened WeChat. For his first pot of gold, he needed to contact someone right away. This person's name was Jiang Wanzhou, another childhood friend of Cheng Zhu's besides Wang Anqiwan. They were in the same class in primary school, junior high, and the same school in high school. You could say they grew up together. The name Wanzhou, as taken from the phrase, "The fishing boats sing in the evening, the sound resonates along the banks of Pengli Lake." Yes, from the preface to the pavilion of Prince Tang, something everyone struggled to memorize in their student years. As a student, Cheng Zhu found memorizing a painful ordeal, but once he left school, with age, he realized that the content in the textbooks was actually a collection of jewels. He first looked through his chat history with Jiang Wanzhou, revisiting their recent conversations to get into the current state of mind. Soon, his gaze focused on a piece of information. It was Jiang Wanzhou telling him that his cousin just opened a new bar, inviting Cheng Zhu to come and visit. During school, it seemed like there was always a sissy and the ridiculously rich student in class. But in Cheng Zhu's youth, these two were combined in Jiang Wanzhou. He had a feminine appearance, a soft-speaking voice, and his mannerisms were also feminine, exuding a gay aura throughout, like a cunning zero. If Cheng Zhu sweated crazily on his face, he'd simply wipe it off with his hand. Jiang Wanzhou, however, would pick up both his delicate hands and fan his face, acting very coquettishly. Yet this guy, who seemed like a game man, actually dreamed of becoming a domineering CEO. Can you believe it? Which domineering CEO wears a black coat and walks with a mincing gait? Cheng Zhu mocked inwardly. But it's undeniable, Jiang Wanzhou is really fucking rich. During their school days, there were rumors that his family owned a whole street of shops. Back then, Cheng Zhu didn't believe it, because he saw Jiang Wanzhou never splurged when spending, and he never wasted food, nor boasted about his wealth. When he told Jiang Wanzhou the gossip, he immediately denied it, gesturing. How could that be? That's so exaggerated. Right. Cheng Zhu laughed along. Only later did he find out that Jiang Wanzhou's family really did own a street of shops. However, the reason he denied it was that the row of shops across the street was not their property. In his view, only if both sides of the street were his family's properties could it be considered owning a whole street of shops. Anything less was at most half a street. In the end, Cheng Zhu started referring to him as President Jiang, and he still called Cheng Zhu Brother Zhu, with everyone going by their own title. Speaking of which, having such a wealthy childhood friend should theoretically make Cheng Zhu's entrepreneurial path easier. But in reality, it wasn't. He and Jiang Wanzhou seemed to be fated not to partner in business, but carrying out their ventures separately. Both were very successful. It's like they were badass by themselves, but together they were just a mess. Cheng Zhu later felt, his energy is too strong. It must overpower me. At that moment, he directly typed, "Didn't you say you wanted to treat me to a drink at your cousin's Joine? How about tonight?" See, actively seeking a treat and even picking the time. "Why are you bossing me around? Address me as Boss Jiang." Boss Jiang replied with dissatisfaction, but the message came in a flash. "Boss Jiang, treat me." Cheng Zhu messaged with a slayer's intent. He could understand Jiang Wanzhou's boundless grievance because he had just reviewed their chat history and noticed Jiang Wanzhou had invited him out quite often during the summer break. But the original Cheng Zhu, who prioritized love over friendship with his attention solely on dating, had neglected him for a long time. "I'll bring you out of the cold palace right now." Additionally, Cheng Zhu sent out an invitation to stay in a hotel together that night. The reason was simple. He was planning to make money till late tonight, and if he came home when it was bright outside, his parents wouldn't be happy. It would be better to simply not return home at all and lie to them that he spent the night at Jiang Wanzhou's place. As for Jiang Wanzhou's family, they were quite peculiar. They couldn't accept their son playing outside until dawn, but didn't mind him not returning home overnight. For someone like Cheng Zhu, whose family prohibited him from staying out all night, it's because they were afraid he'd mess around outside. As for someone like Jiang Wanzhou, his effeminate behavior from childhood is clear to his family, fearing he wouldn't mess around in his lifetime. Thank goodness it's 2014, and there aren't so many cunning zeros and calculating ones on the market. Otherwise, the social norms shift, and the Jiang family would probably worry more. Of course, Cheng Zhu clearly knew Jiang Wanzhou was indeed not gay. The heartthrob of the gay community had no interest in men. He was simply innately effeminate with no other choice. When his mother Su Yun heard Cheng Zhu was staying at Jiang Wanzhou's house that night, she wanted to ask more, but after being praised by her son, she was in a good mood and kept silent. As night fell, it wasn't even 10 o'clock yet when Jiang Wanzhou arrived to pick up Cheng Zhu in his Mercedes G-Class. The two had gone to driving school at lightning speed right after their college entrance exams, and soon came out with driver's licenses. The difference was, Cheng Zhu's license was of no use without a car. Jiang Wanzhou, on the other hand, had too many cars at home to choose from daily. The Mercedes G-Class of that generation hadn't been refreshed yet, nor had it gained the reputation of scumbags drive G-Classes that it would a few years later. In 2014, many people didn't even know its selling price, mistaking it for a normal Mercedes. But, to be honest, the comfort level of the old G-Class was indeed not that great, and Cheng Zhu felt uncomfortable and somewhat disdainful as he sat inside. At Jiang Wanzhou's age, he should have preferred his mother's white Bentley Continental GT. But don't forget, although he looks and acts gay, he dreams of being a domineering CEO, so he prefers cars with a more dominating presence. Once inside, Cheng Zhu closed the car door with force, listening to the sound unique to a Mercedes G-Class, akin to the loading of a bullet. "Long time no see, Boss Jiang," Cheng Zhu said genuinely. "You still know it's been a long time?" Jiang Wanzhou gave him a bone-softening palm, slapping his left arm. Saying so, he also spoke with a touch of sourness. "Why isn't Brother Zhu out on a date today?" It then dawned on Cheng Zhu that when he was dating Li Xinyue, Jiang Wanzhou was adamantly against it, always thinking Li Xinyue wasn't a good person, but Cheng Zhu completely ignored it. "Split up," Cheng Zhu said. "What?" Jiang Wanzhou exclaimed, his right hand ceaselessly patting Cheng Zhu's shoulder, his expression gradually turning to delight. "Could you please focus on driving first?" Cheng Zhu panicked with this driving novice. "So, you thought of drowning your sorrows with me after being dumped, huh? When you were in love, I couldn't even schedule a dinner, had to make an appointment." Jiang Wanzhou said sourly. "I wasn't dumped, damn it. Can you not be such a drama queen?" Cheng Zhu glared at him, annoyed. "When you read CEO romance novels, which side are you even sympathizing with? What are you babbling about now?" Jiang Wanzhou got pissed. Cheng Zhu noticed he was even wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses today. What a pity the CEO vibe still didn't come out. Instead, he looked even more like a gentle bottom. Cheng Zhu stopped teasing him and got straight to the point. "Boss Jiang, how's the business at the bar your cousin opened?" "It wasn't great at first, but recently it's doing well. You know, the World Cup. Suddenly there are more customers coming in to drink beer and watch soccer. My cousin is also a diehard soccer fan. He even asked me if I want to place bets, offered to stake me $1,000 just for fun. For some reasons, Cheng Zhu had come into contact with Jiang Wanzhou's cousin in his previous life. The guy was quite generous, loved saving face, and was a show-off second-generation rich. He seemed careless, but his mind was already scheming. Really? Can he stake some for me? Sure, you can add him on WeChat and transfer the money to him when the time comes. He always tells me the odds he gets for betting are higher than the official lottery, Jiang Wanzhou said. A few hundred? Who are you looking down on? I start at 10,000. Cheng Zhu laughed as he spoke, giving a preemptive warning. Jiang Wanzhou didn't take it seriously, treating it as a joke, and continued to struggle with controlling the steering wheel of the big Mercedes G with his thin arms. It was only now that Cheng Zhu noticed the watch on Jiang Wanzhou's wrist. It was a Vacheron Constantine. If it had been the inexperienced Cheng Zhu from before, he wouldn't have known the value of the watch and would have thought it was fucking ugly, not comparing to his digital watch at all. You, just a mongrel secretly wearing your parents' watch. And me, a trendsetter at the forefront of campus fashion. In fact, the watch was a gift from Jiang Wanzhou's mother for his 18th birthday. As for his father, he gave him a Porsche 911, but he didn't like driving it because he felt it didn't match his domineering CEO temperament and made him look more like a rich kid. Later, after Cheng Zhu made it big, the first designer watch he bought was also a Vacheron Constantine, because he liked the name of the watch and the special shade of blue on its dial. This series was called Overseas. Jiang Wanzhou's cousin owned a bar named Joine, a pun on the word for alcohol addiction. His cousin thought that, located in a prime pricey area, yet named with a character for hidden, it had a lot of prestige. After parking, Jiang Wanzhou confidently led Cheng Zhu inside and then sat down at the bar. During the World Cup, the bar business was indeed booming. And now, it was July 13th. At 3 a.m. on July 14th would be the final of the 2014 World Cup. Therefore, Joine already had quite a few customers. Cheng Zhu listened to the discussions behind him. Many people were talking about football. Of course, quite a few people were lamenting how much money they had lost betting on the World Cup this year. After they sat down, a female bartender inside the bar came over and greeted Jiang Wanzhou, saying, "Little President Jiang." She wore a bartender's uniform, form-fitting, designed to accentuate certain elevated parts. Cheng Zhu glanced at her and pretty much figured that this female bartender must be the main draw of the bar. She clearly recognized Jiang Wanzhou, the boss's cousin, and initiated a chat with him. At the same time, she didn't ignore Cheng Zhu and even introduced herself to him, saying her name was Yizi. When chatting with others, Yizi liked to half lean over the bar with her body slightly tilting forward. Those who mixed in the nightlife knew how to exude charm. Cheng Zhu understood that many bartenders earn commissions, so they liked interacting with customers. Of course, if some customers were wealthy enough, then in addition to interacting, they could interact some more. Jiang Wanzhou thought Cheng Zhu, being at the bar for the first time, might feel a bit shy. But unexpectedly, the kid was quite at ease, casually saying a few words that kept Yizi laughing continuously, her uniform buttons dangerously strained. Since Jiang Wanzhou was treating today, Cheng Zhu didn't even look at the menu but playfully pointed at a row of Hibiki 21 years, placed in the most conspicuous spot on the shelf, asking if they could open a bottle. The bottle looked ordinary, but the price was not low. For a moment, Jiang Wanzhou couldn't tell if Cheng Zhu really knew this drink was expensive or if he was just randomly pointing. He was about to agree when Cheng Zhu casually picked up the menu, ordered a fancily named cocktail, and didn't bring it up again. "I was just saying that. But if you really want to open a bottle, wait until I start working here, so I can earn a commission," Cheng Zhu cheekily said. Jiang Wanzhou glanced at him and retorted without good humor, "Keep dreaming. I'll just take a bottle from my family's liquor cabinet and bring it back tomorrow. Don't even think about making that money." Cheng Zhu gave him a thumbs up and said, "Brilliant. How can you say such ice-cold words with a 37-degree mouth?" Yizi, standing aside, felt like the two seemed to be flirting and thought she might be developing a fujoshi tendency, even slightly intrigued to ship them. The boss's cousin is handsome and refined, and his friend has a bit of a rogue charm. They seem like a great match, Yizi thought secretly. Campus rich, well-behaved student, and school bully, she screamed internally. Cheng Zhu was completely unaware of what Sister Yizi was thinking. If he knew, he might have tried his best to win her over, and then acted out. "I'll show you how to look at people, you fujoshi. I'll show you how to look at people, you fujoshi. I'll show you how to look at people, you fujoshi." The cocktail was soon ready, and Yizi slowly pushed the drink, which cost only a few dollars to make, but sold for several times that per glass, in front of them. Then, she looked up towards the door and smiled, saying, "Little President Jiang, your cousin and cousin-in-law are here. At first, Cheng Zhu didn't think much of it, but hearing Yi Zi mention cousin-in-law, he was slightly stunned. He later attended Technology University in Hang City. Jiang Wanzhou's cousin was Cheng Zhu Sr. by 1 year at the university, very famous, the dream campus goddess for countless people, absolutely a rich and beautiful girl. When Jiang Wanzhou came to Technology University to find him, he had also invited his cousin to have a meal together. He wasn't sure if he was serious or just teasing, but he had privately told Cheng Zhu that his cousin had never been in a relationship and asked, "What do you think? Want to give a shot?" But Cheng Zhu thought that someone of her social class could easily spend on a piece of clothing what amounted to his living expenses for several months. He couldn't afford a date, much less maintain her. Speaking of which, Jiang Wanzhou revived his spirits and asked, "How much you planning to bet? A few hundred? This CEO will join you for some fun." Hilarious. Only the moneyless ones need your support. The rich ones end up supporting you. You really think about that crap? Playing the macho card here, are we? As the saying goes, marry a good person first, strike it rich with a noble person later. Marry a rich woman and do both. Damn, did I think too small? Cheng Zhu joked to himself. Back then, he had brushed it off with, "What? You want to call me brother-in-law, huh?" He thought it was an immature idea. As for now, well, he often had some overly mature ideas. Of course, Cheng Zhu was also clear in hindsight that with his standard from his past university days, relying on his somewhat rogue handsome face and an athletic build comparable to sports students, snagging an average pretty girl would certainly not be a problem. But when it came to the level of Jiang Wanzhou's older cousin, the chances were next to none. At this moment, he turned his head toward the entrance of the bar and noticed many male customers uniformly looking in the direction of the door. Some of them were acquainted with the bar owner, Shun Minglang, while others were drawn by the woman beside Shun Minglang. Her name was Shun Qingning, with a height of at least 1.68 m, wearing a black knee-length dress that revealed a pair of smooth and well-proportioned calves. Half a circle of small pearls adorned the neckline of the dress, but the pearl's white was far less enticing than the paler white of her skin. She was the typical kind with cold, fair skin which, under the bar lights, appeared even more delicate. More importantly, her aura was also the cooler type, giving off a keep-away vibe. Cheng Zhu noticed a detail at this time. That is, when many beautiful girls are looked at by men, some pretend not to notice, others avoid their gaze. But Shun Qingning was different. She simply glanced around the bar, and with the sweep of this cool beauty's gaze, several men who had been sizing her up actually looked away. Strong presence, as cool as ever. Cheng Zhu sighed internally. In his opinion, this kind of woman not only cut through men, but also women. In fact, Shun Qingning was also very popular among the female students at Technology University. "Ah, sister, slay me." As for Shun Minglang, his physical description, skip. At this point, Shun Minglang and Shun Qingning walked towards Jiang Wanzhou and greeted him. "Yo, if it isn't little President Jiang. Get lost." So annoying. Jiang Wanzhou rolled his eyes at him. His friends calling him Little President Jiang would make him happy, but his cousin doing so annoyed him. However, it was obvious that they had a good family relationship. Now, Cheng Zhu's family was quite average in terms of relative relations. His family had the typical clear-cut hierarchy of relationships. In his household, it wasn't about seniority, it was about economic conditions and social status. And actually, many ordinary or even down-and-out families are like this, even more so. Shun Minglang glanced at Cheng Zhu and asked Jiang Wanzhou, "Is this the good friend you mentioned to me on WeChat?" After Jiang Wanzhou nodded, Shun Minglang raised his left hand, revealing his Patek Philippe Nautilus, famously known as Steel King, and shook hands with Cheng Zhu while showing off. Shun Minglang, Jiang Wanzhou's most revered cousin. He said this as though he had completely forgotten that just a few seconds ago, Jiang Wanzhou was telling him to get lost. "You're his good friend, so just call me cousin." "Cousin, Cheng Zhu." Cheng Zhu didn't mind calling him that at all and stated his name. "All right, little cousin," Shun Minglang said nonchalantly, not bothering to remember the name. He just called Cheng Zhu little cousin for tonight. At a bar gathering, a handle is enough, and there's no guarantee of further contact in the future anyway. But still, Shun Minglang entertained warmly with a smile. "High school graduate, you smoke, right? Easy, cut 2 cigars for me." There were cigars sold at the bar, and indeed some customers would specifically order them. Some were used to smoking them, while others thought they looked damn cool smoking a cigar. No sooner had these words been spoken than Shun Qingning's gaze stayed fixed on Shun Minglang's face. It was clear she hadn't said a word, but her brother, Shun Minglang, coughed lightly and changed the subject, saying to Yi Zi, "Deliver the cigars to A03. That table over there is my friend's." Cough. Only after he felt the gaze move away from his face did Shun Minglang playfully slap Cheng Zhu on the shoulder and said, "Thought too much. expecting me to offer you a cigar? Kid, don't smoke when you're young, got it? Got it. Cheng Zhu laughed, going along with his act. Cheng Zhu looked at the hand on his shoulder and deliberately took a few extra long glances at the watch on Shen Minglang's wrist. He suddenly remembered that at this time, luxury watches were still affordable. Unlike later on, when popular Patek Philippe and Rolex models almost always sold over the retail price, some even quadrupling in value in the secondary market. That's also a way to make money. Why do some rich people get richer? You see, Shen Minglang spends money on a watch to show off, but after a few years, he'll realize, hey, if I sell it now, I even make a damn profit. What's up? At that moment, Shen Minglang raised his wrist and asked, looking for the time? No, it's cool. Cheng Zhu complimented the watch directly. Shen Minglang immediately beamed. Strangely enough, because the compliment came from a recently graduated high school student, it felt especially sincere. People in his circle would validate the price of the watch, but a high schooler's praise, that's a nod to my taste and style. On the side, Jiang Wanzhou was shocked. Why do I feel like cousin got easily played by him? Feeling validated by the high school student, Shen Minglang laughed and made a big gesture. Don't sit at the bar anymore, come to A01. I'm keeping that seat for myself. And Yizi, put the drinks for my little cousin on my tab tonight. You pay for your own. He didn't forget to point at Jiang Wanzhou. This earned Jiang Wanzhou another big eye roll. And so, the four of them made their way to A01 and took their seats. Jiang Wanzhou and Shen Minglang sat on either side of Cheng Zhu. The future cool and distant school senior, Shen Qingning, sat directly across from him. Bathed in the dim light of the bar, he found his future school senior to indeed be a campus goddess, and he affirmed her beauty. Jiang Wanzhou once said his cousin is also talented. She plays the piano and does ballet. A goddess is one thing, long legs another, and damn it, she's a long-legged goddess who can do splits. And she has that icy cold face to boot. This made him feel increasingly good tonight. Who comes to a bar wanting a bunch of plain Janes at their table? He thought to himself, my parents always wanted me to become an outstanding person, and clearly I've completed 4/5 of that, becoming quite the colorful person. P.S. Thanks to In Poor Journey, yet one may prosper for the Silver League reward, and also thanks to some new friends for their rewards and votes, are these 2 chapters of nearly 8,000 words considered an extra update. Outside Join Bar, a Mercedes-Benz was struggling to perform a parallel parking maneuver. The Benz's S-Class model was already long-bodied, and Li Rui, who had only recently acquired his driver's license, had tried several times without success to park it. Sitting in the back were Li Xinyue and her best friend Chun Rongrong, which made Li Rui's face turn bright red with tension. The more nervous he became, the harder it was for him to park the car. Unfortunately, this was the only marked parking spot available, and he dared not park anywhere else. After all, he had managed to take his dad's car out for the night, and getting a ticket from the police would undoubtedly lead to a scolding. Li Rui finally managed to awkwardly park the big Mercedes and immediately got out to open the car door for Li Xinyue in a bid to display his gentlemanly demeanor and warm-hearted charm. He was in a particularly good mood today because Li Xinyue had broken up with Cheng Zhu, and they had even unfriended each other this time. There's no going back now. Their relationship is definitely beyond repair. So, he immediately sought out Chun Rongrong and asked her to invite Li Xinyue to the bar for a drink that evening. Chun Rongrong had sneaked off to nightclubs back in her high school days and had even dated a club promoter. How else to explain her radiant aura of fertility? Li Xinyue, on the other hand, had never been to a bar. For some students at this stage, a nightclub was a forbidden place, yet there was also a curious attraction. Li Rui specifically chose a quiet bar, not one of those dance clubs, because he knew that would surely result in a refusal from Li Xinyue. On their way there, he was posturing the whole time. This bar called Join, I'm pretty familiar with the owner. In reality, it was his cousin who knew Shen Minglang, and the bar had just opened when his cousin helped to advertise it on social media. Li Rui didn't personally know Shen Minglang at all. When he went to pay later, he was going to use his cousin's membership card as if it were his own, thinking that it would make him look cooler. Before they left, he had already discussed with his cousin about transferring the money afterwards. Quite a childish act, but some guys just go through such phases. And believe it or not, some dudes, not just at 18, but even at 28, still like to front with all kinds of inexplicably lame pretenses. On the way to the bar, Li Xinyue and Chun Rongrong sat at the back, chatting about Cheng Zhu. Li Xinyue retold their conversation, which was frustrating and amusing to Chun Rongrong. When Ye had told him, "We're truly finished this time," he actually responded with a casual "okay." What kind of rare genius comes up with that? A simple "okay," or "sure" wouldn't have been as bizarre as that. How can he be like that? Chen Rongrong couldn't help but blurt out her criticism. Li Rui chimed in at the right moment. When I heard him say he was behind warm guys and dogs, I knew something was off about his attitude. A man should always treat a woman unconditionally well. A woman is there to be unconditionally adored. This kid was still sticking to his warm guy persona. Li Rui felt that at this moment, he must appear in stark contrast to Cheng Zhu in Li Xinyue's eyes. Exactly. Chen Rongrong voiced her agreement. She and Li Xinyue were similar. Both tended to be high maintenance during their romances. Birds of a feather, so to speak, which is why she resonated strongly with Li Rui's views, deeming Cheng Zhu to be in the wrong. Little did she know, in Cheng Zhu's eyes, acting out as a true princess was considered princess sickness. But what were they displaying? It looked more like wild chicken emotional instability syndrome. At that moment, the three of them walked into Juin Bar, each feeling a touch of novelty about the place. The bar was somewhat dimly lit, and it wasn't until they were seated that they realized the person sitting opposite them seemed to be Cheng Zhu. It's Cheng Zhu, Chen Rongrong whispered. Li Rui cursed inwardly at the bad luck and suggested, should we switch to a different bar? However, Li Xinyue shook her head, her gaze fixated on Shun Qingning. Even though she could only see her side profile, Shun Qingning's demeanor, appearance, or those unmistakably long legs all seemed to be a notch higher than Li Xinyue's. Furthermore, she exuded an indescribable air of nobility, like a cool and rich young lady. Some girls just have that vibe. One look, and you could tell they came from a wealthy family. Shun Qingning was one of those girls. No, let's stay here, Li Xinyue suddenly said. Well, okay then. Li Rui and Chen Rongrong exchanged a glance. Chen Rongrong asked in a low voice, do you recognize any of the people with Cheng Zhu? Li Xinyue shook her head and said, I only know Jiang Wanzhou. He's a good friend of Cheng Zhu, but I don't like him. He's too effeminate. On the other side, Cheng Zhu and Jiang Wanzhou had also noticed Li Xinyue and the other sitting not far across from them. Jiang Wanzhou smiled and said, look, your recently ex-girlfriend is there. No sooner had the words left his mouth than Shun Minglang seemed to perk up, asking, where? Let me see how my cousin's taste is. Cheng Zhu hadn't expected to run into them, but didn't make a fuss about it. He'd been through these kinds of situations many times before. Later, he went to Wu City to start a business. Although the small commodities market there was world famous, it was, after all, a small county-level city. And with his personality later turning to that of a prodigal who sees the error of his ways only to relapse, it was inevitable that he would occasionally run into women with whom he had history or even misadventures. No panic. Small scene. From his viewpoint, these high school graduates were still in the phase where they got nervous just speaking on stage or shy to sing loudly at KTV. So in this kind of public setting, they weren't likely to make a scene. When he saw Li Rui looking over, he locked eyes with him, causing Li Rui to sheepishly look away. Following Cheng Zhu's gaze, Shun Minglang grinned and said, not bad. Both the girls look youthful. Are both your ex-girlfriends, cousin? Should I have Yi send over a fruit platter? No need. Cheng Zhu replied with a laugh. Cousin's quite the generous one. While everything was relaxed and comfortable on their side, it was a different story for Li Xinyue's group, now feeling increasingly uneasy because Shun Minglang and Shun Qingning kept looking over, resulting in an unfamiliar discomfort. She felt a level of embarrassment she had never experienced before, and because of this embarrassment, she became even more annoyed with Cheng Zhu. It's all his fault. At this moment, the bar screens were playing a replay of the World Cup. Numerous patrons around them were still discussing the previous match. Some were excited, others regretful. Chen Rongrong initiated a new topic. I've heard a lot of people are betting on the games recently. Do you know anyone who's doing it? Li Xinyue shook her head, clearly distracted. Li Rui, however, seized the moment and boasted, in a few hours, it will be the World Cup final between Argentina and Germany. I'm planning to place a small bet of 2,000. He began subtly flaunting his financial power, slightly raising his voice. You're betting 2,000? That's a lot. Chen Rongrong exclaimed in surprise. It's okay, just a bit of fun, Li Rui said, making his voice echo a tad more. The bar's background music was soft, but the volume of the World Cup replay was louder, making Li Rui's words faintly audible to those sitting with Cheng Zhu. Tisich, betting 2,000, little rich kid, eh? It was unclear whether Shun Minglang was genuinely impressed or being sarcastic. At that moment, Jiang Wanzhou left for the restroom. Cheng Zhu had been waiting for this opportunity. So he said, Cousin, Jiang Wanzhou mentioned I could ask you for help with placing bets. Said you have good odds. Yeah, if you trust me, of course. It's just a simple favor, he replied with a smile. He had already placed his bets, rooting for Germany to win the championship, with a stake of 50,000. The odds were good, at 2.3, meaning if Germany really did win, he would earn a handsome 65,000. Shen Minglang asked, "Cousin, which side do you think will win?" "Germany." Cheng Zhu responded without hesitation. Good choice. I've also bet on Germany. Just a small wager of 50,000. Shen Minglang patted his shoulder. Cheng Zhu laughed. Weren't you just claiming to be a die-hard Messi fan? Why not bet on Argentina? Right, so for the sake of my idol, I did bet 500 on Argentina winning. Shen Minglang nodded, as if he's a granny sneaking into the cookie jar. Got me laughing. Cheng Zhu gave him a thumbs up. Touching. How much are you betting on Germany to win, cousin? I'm offering odds of 2.3. Shen Minglang said to Cheng Zhu. Unexpectedly, Cheng Zhu shook his head. Cousin, I'm not betting on the championship. I'm betting on the score. Whoa, ambitious. You're going straight for the correct score bet. What scores are you looking at? Shen Minglang asked. Getting the winner right was one thing, but predicting the exact score much more improbable. Of course, that meant much higher odds. Cheng Zhu inquired, "What are your odds for a 0-0 draw?" Shen Minglang checked his phone. "Let me see, the odds are 7.5. Then bet on that for me. I think it's going to be 0-0 during regular time, and then go to overtime." "Cousin, what's the easiest way for me to transfer the money to you?" Cheng Zhu asked. "Damn, you've got guts, betting on 0-0. Anyway is fine for transferring. I'm okay with anything," Shen Minglang replied. "How much are you betting?" 12,000, Cheng Zhu said without hesitation. 12,000, sure. Wait, how much did you say? Shen Minglang looked up, his face showing surprise.